Good morning, everyone. I am delighted to be here to introduce my colleague, Dr. Bonnie Kaplan, who will co-present with me today. We will be talking all about APrON and provide the historical foundations for APrON, along with how APrON has changed over time. Dr. Kaplan is a retired professor from the University of Calgary's Cummings School of Medicine, Department of Pediatrics, and importantly, founder of the APrON cohort. I am a professor with the U of C Faculty of Nursing and Cummings School of Medicine in the Departments of Pediatrics, Psychiatry, and Community Health Sciences. Since Bonnie's retirement, I have been proud to lead the APrON cohort. Dr. Kaplan's biography and mine are both available on the APrON website at apronstudy.ca/conferences. APrON began with Bonnie's original $5 million grant from the Alberta Heritage Foundation for Medical Research, now known as Alberta Innovates Health Solutions. Since then, APrON's focus has expanded over time, and our team has accrued an additional approximately $15 million from many sources listed here. But where did all this begin? Bonnie, would you like to tell us?
Thank you very much, Nicole, and hello everyone. As you can imagine, I'm delighted to be here for the 10th anniversary celebration. I'm going to say a few words about the slide in front of you, giving you a bit of a history leading up to it. Where did APrON actually begin? Well, it actually began from experiences that Brenda Leung and I had together when Brenda was still a PhD student. She had been looking all over the world at various pregnancy and birth cohorts that had collected data on maternal nutrition and maternal mental health. She was hoping to do some secondary analyses on some aspects of the variables that those teams were not examining. I clearly recall getting off of a phone call with a Scandinavian investigator and feeling so discouraged as she was because we had found out once again their evaluation of maternal nutrition was so narrow. Most of them were limited to something like a single food frequency questionnaire in pregnancy. Brenda and I realized that we simply were not going to find anyone in the world who had collected data across pregnancy. I don't know how these people could consider the trimesters to be of equal weight, but that seemed to be the general approach. So how could we collect the data on our own? Just about then, I don't remember exactly how much longer it was, but soon afterwards, AHFMR announced their first interdisciplinary team competition. And clearly, we both felt we had to apply for this. But we needed quite a large interdisciplinary team, and that's what you have on the slide in front of you. I was so honored that when I put out the call for people to come together and very, very quickly, with incredibly short timeline, put together this grant application, all of these people responded yes. As most of you know, APrON is a longitudinal pregnancy cohort study evolving from three major health concerns, one related to mental disorders, secondly neurodevelopmental disorders, and third about nutritional impacts in relationship to both. And I'll be saying more about those in a moment. The point of these next three slides is to give you some up-to-date information about the disorders and developmental problems that I just referred to, and give you some references if you want to look up any of them. But really, it's also to show you that nothing much has changed in terms of the prevalence of these problems and the concerns surrounding them. The only thing really that perhaps has changed is that there's a bit more awareness. For example, I'll just highlight on this slide the neurodevelopmental disorders and mental health disorders in general amongst our youth. It's just an enormous problem. I mean, the current lifetime prevalence rate for mental disorders, though not on this slide, is actually 50% in both Canada and the U.S. Right now, in terms of children and youth, an estimated 10 to 20% of our children live with mental health problems. And one thing that everyone agrees on is that the origin of not just the neurodevelopmental problems, that's kind of obvious, but of mental health problems can virtually always be traced to childhood. In 2016, as shown on the slide, the World Health Organization recognized that most mental health problems emerge in childhood and adolescence, including the list there. So as I said, nothing much has changed since the inception of APrON, but perhaps there is greater awareness. The one thing which really has changed is a greater awareness of the role of nutrients for brain function and mental health. Many studies now have shown that nutrient deficiencies are associated with mood disorders. Many more studies have shown that teaching people to eat better or giving them nutrients in pill form results in improvement in mood and anxiety disorders. And we have some very interesting data that are really much more relevant to APrON, looking at babies. I put in a recent study that just came out on 88 Hispanic mothers where 24-hour dietary recalls were carried out at 1 and 6 months postnatally, and then infant cognition was tested with the Bailey. There was some evidence that maternal consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages and juice were associated with infant neurodevelopment at 24 months. But why? We don't really have proof that sugar-sweetened drinks harm brain development, but there are a number of studies which I don't have time to present here, but in many cases studies use that variable as a marker of insufficient micronutrient consumption, because if you're drinking a lot of sugar-sweetened beverages, the odds are that you are not consuming very many micronutrient-rich foods. And this is very relevant during gestation. Even in westernized countries, pregnant women are often deficient in certain nutrients, vitamins, minerals, omega-3 fatty acids, and so on. And deficiencies have been shown even in middle to upper level income women, so it is not something which is perfectly or closely correlated with socioeconomic status. As we will show, this has been a major focus of APrON work, particularly regarding choline and vitamin D and folate and so on. And we need to be concerned because other studies have shown that more than 50% of what Canadians ingest and call food is actually nutrient-poor, ultra-processed stuff. I can't quite bring myself to call it food. Sometimes I call it chemical soup. So let's return now to look again at the original objectives of APrON. We wanted to determine the relationship between maternal nutrient intake and status during pregnancy in terms of maternal mental health, perinatal outcomes, and children's neurodevelopment and cognitive function. So again, all of these questions are still of great relevance today. Along the way, we also created a biobank of DNA for future studies. This slide just repeats the criteria for entry into the study, what we call the target population of APrON: pregnant women at least 16 years of age, less than 27 weeks gestation, able to complete questionnaires in English, and not planning to move out of the city within 6 months of inclusion into the study. Finally, I'll conclude this portion of our presentation by just showing you the timeline in a graphic form that we developed quite a few years ago. With above the timeline, we have the list of questionnaire information that we were acquiring, and below the timeline, the physical measurements that were obtained. So, Nicole, would you like to take it from here?
Thank you, Bonnie. This is our originally recruited sample. As you can see, at enrollment in the first or second trimester of pregnancy, mothers were on average 31 years of age. Most, or 56%, were pregnant with their first baby. Most, or 96%, were married or common law. Most had completed university or even graduate school. Most, or 80%, were Caucasian, and most reported family income of more than $100,000 per year. With respect to the APrON children, the average gestational age was 39 weeks, the average birth weight was 3.33 kilos, and just over half were boys. Here are data on our retention rates over time. In trimester 1 and 2, referred to here as A or B, baseline, we retained 88 to 97%, obviously very high as these data correspond to enrollment. In the third trimester, here referred to as C, we dropped down to 91% retention. At 3 months postnatal, time E in the chart, we regained some of our sample with 93% retention. At 6 months postnatal, time F in the chart, we dropped down again, this time to 80%, which remained steady at 1 year, or time G in the chart. At 2 years of age, more parents declined to take part, dropping down to 67%. But fortunately, we regained about 15% of parents back, with 82% completing APrON questionnaires when their children were 3 years of age, or at time I. While these numbers are pretty high and speak to a good amount of participant engagement with APrON, surveys sent out in between times have ranged in the 50 to 56% response rate. For example, we surveyed mothers about their adverse childhood experiences in an off-cycle cross-sectional questionnaire, and of the 2,189 enrolled participants, only 1,230, or 56%, responded. We received a similar response rate to our recent COVID-19 questionnaire. Since APrON's original $5 million grant from the Alberta Heritage Foundation for Medical Research, now known as Alberta Innovates, the team has expanded and changed considerably from the team that Bonnie introduced us to earlier. As new team members were added, the focus of the APrON data collection has expanded too. This is not an exhaustive list, but I want to point out that in addition to the original team that we now call the legacy team, we've added new team members to the management team. Our current staff are highlighted, but again, bear in mind that at one point in time when APrON was actively recruiting, there were many more staff, upwards of 20 at a time. We have also added many collaborators to our team. This list here is by no means exhaustive. In addition to researchers from the U of C, including Tavis Campbell, Niels Folkert, Suzanne Tuff, Fariba Ajajafari, and Sherry Madigan, we have added new team members from across Alberta, including Anita Kozerski and Yi Yuan of U of A. We've added those from across Canada, including Yvonne Lemers and her international team, along with Michael Kobor and his postdoctoral fellows Sarah Moore and Sarah Merrill, all from UBC. Patricia Palufo-Silveira of the McGill Douglas Institute and her international team have also become important collaborators. Further internationally, we have partnerships with new team members from Australia, for example, Anne-Louise Ponsonby and Richard Safri from the Murdoch Children's Research Institute, from the European Union, including John Martin of Stockholm University, and from the US, including Steve Cole of UCLA and Jay Belsky from UC Davis. We have also had nearly innumerable trainees over the last 10+ years. This is just a sampling of the many trainees we have had. This points to the many sub-projects that have emerged from APrON as trainees typically prepare posters or papers from their work with us. Some of our trainees have gone on to be investigators themselves, and some never left and became independent APrON investigators, a real testament to the value of the APrON dataset. Here is our APrON timeline today. We began with our first baby's birth in 2009 and ended recruitment in 2013 with our last APrON baby's birth. We completed the original commitment from the Alberta Innovates $5 million funding to collect data in pregnancy through to 3 years of child age in 2016 and completed most cleaning of that data in 2017. With new funding, we completed follow-up of the children at 5 years of age in 2018, and we are now in the midst of following up our now at least 8-year-old children. We plan to follow them up again at age 12 and have the questionnaire ready to go. We have also put in a large funding application to follow up the children at 15 to 16 years of age, so fingers crossed. Measures of infant and child behavior and development in the APrON original $5 million grant included those in the light green column, such as the child behavior checklist. Additional measures have been added at ages 3 to 5 years, including the BASC-2, which measures behavior and mental health, and the brief preschool assessment, which characterizes executive functioning, noted in the dark green column, as well as several measures of IQ and movement and neuropsychological assessments indicated in the light blue column. Finally, in the far right dark blue column, many measures of parent-child relationship quality have been added, albeit on smaller sample sizes, due to the intensive nature of the assessments, like the strange situation procedure, which measures parent-child attachment. Many other measures have been added, including maternal cortisol diurnal rhythm in pregnancy and cortisol reactivity in infants at 6 and 18 months of age, both indicated by the picture of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis in the left lower corner. We are also examining epigenetics, or gene expression, drawn from the original APrON biobank. We are also examining neurotoxicants like BPA from maternal blood during pregnancy. We're also examining the children's microbiome. We are examining adverse childhood experiences, indicated by the picture in the upper right corner. We are conducting brain scans for structure and function in preschoolers, indicated by the bottom right diagram. And finally, we are examining the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on child and family risk and resiliency. As mentioned before, we are pleased to report that from our original $5 million grant, an additional $15 million or so has been attained in more than 60 new grants. Significant studies have examined nutrition from various angles, including examination of vitamin D, milk and dairy, maternal iron and B vitamins, and often by the dynamic duo Field and Bell. Other studies of nutrition have examined the impact of fat and weight gain during pregnancy and postpartum, as well as B vitamins' impacts on brain health. Also note the epigenetic work, which was made possible by the biobank established by Bonnie in the original grant. The last grant listed here focuses on how B vitamins may impact gene expression. Other nutrition studies have examined the combined impacts of nutrient status and maternal distress, like prenatal and postnatal depression, on maternal and child outcomes, often focusing on outcomes related to the neuroendocrine function or stress response system of young children. 12 studies have examined data from APrON families to understand the developmental origins of health and disease, or DOHAD, including those examining how early life adversity may interact with stress reactivity or genotype in predicting health and development, especially resilience. An important sub-study of APrON called fetal programming of infant stress reactivity spawned several investigations of how prenatal and postnatal experiences impacted children's stress reactivity, behavioral development, and propensity for immune-related dysfunction. At the bottom is the key study that enabled APrON to continue beyond the original prenatal to 3 years of child age. We are very grateful to the Alberta Children's Hospital Foundation for funding us to follow our children to ages 8 to 12, along with our collaborators from the All Our Family study. Together, for this work, we were co-branded the Alberta Births Common Dataset, or ABCD. Led by Deborah Dewey, 11 studies have been funded to examine neurotoxicants, including studying the unique impacts of neurotoxicants or in combination with nutrition as a potentially protective factor to children's development. Also, how neurotoxicants may impact gene expression or epigenetics as a mean to explain neurodevelopment in children. Finally, the neurotoxicants most examined by Dr. Dewey and her colleagues include bisphenol A, or BPA, as well as phthalates. Of the more than 60 studies over and above the original APrON study, 10 have examined parenting and attachment as predictors of children's health and development. Topics cited include parental reflective function, or how parents have insight into their children's thoughts and feelings, how parenting interacts with children's genotype in predicting children's behavior, what predicts disorganized attachment, that is, a pattern of attachment linked to later psychopathology in children over their lifespans, and finally, whether parents' use of letting their babies cry themselves to sleep as part of sleep training impacts the security of attachment to parents. 2 studies have focused on brain structure and function, led by Catherine LaBelle. She has examined impacts of prenatal exposures on children's brain structure and function, as well as how neurotoxicants impact brain structure and function. 12 projects have not focused at all on nutrition, but rather on a variety of other topics. For example, how mother's mood or depressive symptoms affect her cortisol levels in pregnancy and later health outcomes, such as maternal irritable bowel disease, or the role of the gut microbiota in predicting children's internalizing behavior and mental health problems. To date, APrON has published 108 peer-reviewed papers in respected and high-impact journals, and nearly countless posters and presentations. I estimate the count must be approaching 1,000. In the many presentations that follow us today, you'll hear about key findings in many areas, including nutrition, mental health, children's health and development, children's brain structure and function, gene-by-environment interactions, the microbiome, how stress gets under the skin, and the impacts of neurotoxin exposures on children's health and development, and more. So, Bonnie and I will not report on any of that now. You'll have to stay tuned to learn more over the day. And with that, I will turn it over to Bonnie for her concluding remarks.
Brenda Leung and I have been working very hard with our statistician, Misha Eliashu, as well as Catherine Field and Rhonda Bell, our nutrition scientists, to look at different ways to analyze the maternal nutrition data in relationship to maternal mental health. That work is being prepared for publication, which we are all very excited about. And we think that APrON remains uniquely placed to answer many other important questions because of the frequent data collection during pregnancy, because childhood outcome data now goes to the age of 8 years, because we can understand new causal connections from longitudinal data, and so on. We are poised to transition to a multi-generational cohort, so I think the future looks very bright indeed. So I want to thank you for listening to us today. We're happy to take a few questions in the time we have left. And you can also reach out to us by email. I've provided covers of Nicole's 3 books on parenting on the bottom right of this slide, as well as a cover of The Better Brain, which is a book that I'm bringing out through Houghton Mifflin Harcourt in a few months. Our email addresses are there for you to reach us, as well as I've put my website on there, and I'd be happy to talk to anyone about nutrition in terms of mental health.